I am checking in with the March updates. And so the 2025 MLRG Life and Style March Tour Stop is a book discussion. So the book for this quarter is The Miseducation of the Negro by Carter G. Woodson. And those of you who are familiar, Carter G. Woodson, he started in 1926 Negro History Week, which later became Black History Month. And so he wrote a book, one of his books, but one of the books is The Miseducation of the Negro. And so that is the book we will be reading, or some of us have read it now, but the discussion will be on Sunday, March the 23rd at 2 p.m. So there's a link if you want to register and participate in that discussion. The other update is we will have our business meeting. And so it is Wednesday, March the 12th at 6 p.m. and it's via Zoom. So for those of you who are business owners, you can join us. It is real estate centric, so we'll be talking about fair housing as the main topic, but we also touch on other business topics too. And so some people join us just to hear the information or to excuse me, to hear the information that we're discussing about real estate, or sometimes just to get some business interaction. So sometimes it becomes a networking function, but also we talk about just general business practices as well. So anyway, this is going to be the end of the first quarter. And so every quarter we have 3 activities. And so first month is spades, second month is bingo, and the third month is a book discussion. So we also announced the next book so that you have almost 3 months to read it. Actually, everything is on the website. So you can register for the rest of 2025 if you're interested. Spades used to be our most popular activity, but it seems like bingo has beaten that. People are really enjoying playing bingo on a Friday night. And 7 o'clock is when we normally have it. And so some people have already registered for the rest of the year. You can win nominal gifts. It's just a $5 gift card, but they add up if you keep winning. So anyway, I hope you're having a wonderful weekend. Just wanted to stop through with some of the updates. You can go to metropolitanlivingrealtygroup.com. You can see various things there, but we have the MLRG Life and Style Tour page if you want to see what's going on for the rest of the year and register on that page. It's also an Eventbrite, so we have a collection. It's the MLRG Life and Style Tour collection if it's easier to check that way. But on this post, there's a link for this month's activity. So anyway, enjoy the rest of your weekend, and I'll be back with another post sometime soon. Bye. Good day, everyone. This is Wanda Farrar. It is the 2025 MLRG Life and Style March Tour Stop. And the book that we're discussing today is The Miseducation of the Negro by Carter G. Woodson. And as many of you know, he has been considered the father of Black History Month. And then in 1926, he declared Negro History Week, which later evolved into Black History Month. So we are starting our book discussion. I will come back in a few. Matter of fact, I'll come back in a few with a couple videos for you to see, and then you can join in if you like. We actually have to give some folks a new login. So if you have a login and it's not working, feel free to reach out to me. You can either text me or do Facebook Messenger and I'll get that to you. But anyway, welcome to our March tour stop, which is our book discussion of The Miseducation of the Negro. We'll be back. Hey, you guys. This is our intermission, or the middle point of our book discussion. This is the 2025 MLRG Life and Style March tour stop, and the book is titled The Miseducation of the Negro by Carter G. Woodson. And I'm going to share a video clip, and this is regarding his birthday celebration and the 90th anniversary of this book, which was last year. So the discussion is before 2025, just so that you know, because it may be different if it was this year, but this was from last year. Oh, let me make sure I'm sharing it with you. Let's see. Did I share?
Take the kid. Put the kid out.
Good afternoon, everyone. I know we're here to see Dr. Hannah Nicole Jones, my spirit sister and fellow Jones girl, but I just have to give a moderator's statement so we can have some context for our conversation on today. So we're here to celebrate the 90th anniversary of Miseducation of the Negro, published by Dr. Woodson. This is a 1992, a solid publication of that work. And I want to give some dates. So our students, as they say, students, lifelong learners, let's jot down some numbers. 1619, 1875, 1912, 1915, and 1916, and 1933. So we know about 1619, we'll get in conversation about that, but Carter G. Woodson was born December 19th in 1877. He passed away in April of 1950. That's going to be 75 years. In the next 2 years, it'll be 75 years since he's passed away. So our understanding of him is growing somewhat dim because his lived experience has very much been foreign to us and those of us who are living now. In 1912, he matriculated at Harvard University and obtained a PhD in American history. He was the first and only person of enslaved ancestry to acquire the doctorate degree from Harvard University. His dissertation was on the education of the Negro. Education was a very fascinating aspect that had been denied his enslaved parents and the enslaved persons that came out of emancipation in the 19th century. In 1915, in the wake of the film Birth of a Nation, he creates the Association for the Study of Negro Life and History. His advocacy was the idea that education opens your mind and dismisses the stereotype or the speculation and the rumor that supports a person. In 1916, he publishes the Journal of Negro History. So today I want us to kind of understand who he is and the times in which he lived. And if you can kind of just make a circle, we're going to use him as a lens or a prism through which we're going to see refracted the light of individuals in his time period. So in 1933, Miseducation of the Negro was published, but it's important to understand that all the articles in this book were published in the Universal Negro Improvement Association, the UNIA's paper, The Black World. So as a result, it was already published. And he compiles all of these articles together to make it a more readable, compact conversation. And in the midst of what he's doing here, and I'm going to bring in 1619, we're going to loop on back, so give me a minute. We have him talking to three distinct audiences. He's speaking to his people, those individuals who were born of enslaved parent ancestry, and those individuals who are living in that time period, to understand the importance of education. He was also speaking to African-American detractors. All the enemy is not outside the race. There's enemies within the race that also cause problems. Then he was speaking to allies of any race and enemies of other races against the Negro. So he understood a tri-leveled layer, as which historians do, an understanding of the situation scientifically. That it's not just simply about African Americans, internal enemies or external enemies. It's about understanding the landscape and the warfare that you're going to be engaged in. That's what's made this book very seminal. Because as human beings live and exist, we're not going to really change a lot of people. But when you understand the landscape, you're able to engage differently. So as we think about him as a prism through which we're seeing light refracted, I want to lift up gender. And I'm so happy to have my sister journalist here. I trained in journalism at Howard University, so we're going to have some really good questions. But nevertheless, the idea of one woman in particular. They always talk about Mary McLeod Bethune. She is my heart. I love Mrs. Bethune. But as in conversation with Mrs. Bethune, here in Washington, D.C., a graduate of this very school was a woman named Nannie Helen Burroughs. Are we familiar with Nannie Helen Burroughs, anybody? And to my brothers of the Divine Nine, founded at Howard University in 1911, I have to add another omega to your roster. Colonel Wyatt, who's over there, if he can please wave his hand, has led a personal crusade to elevate the name of Nannie Helen Burroughs. So I want to share with you just a few things about her and hopefully have you go away to understand who she was, how she lived her life, and how we can identify with her work. So born on May 2nd, 1879 in Orange, Virginia, to Jenny and John Burroughs, Nannie Helen Burroughs was an average person. But her mother realized that opportunities in that part of Virginia were not going to be to her benefit. So the mother left her husband and brought her children to Washington, D.C. She matriculated here at the M Street, now Dunbar High School. The old M Street building is still over there at 128 M Street. That was the physical building they attended. Woodson's going to teach at the M Street School. So they're going to be crossing paths all the course of their lives. Now, interesting enough, what she realized is she was extremely gifted. Like our young people, she was very well spoken. She was Black resistance, literally. And she sought to teach here in Washington, D.C. And once again, when we talk about the different landscapes, in Washington, D.C., there was a color line within the African-American community. Someone who was very dark complected did not have very many opportunities during her time period. And although she qualified to be a teacher, she wasn't allowed to be a public school teacher. She didn't let that defeat her. I'll open my own school and I'll set my own path because I want to teach our people. So she opens a school, and her school is the National Training Institute for Women and Girls. Now, they said it was about domestic science and the 3 B's, the bath, the broom, and the Bible. Not in that order, but the idea that people coming out of enslavement, her mother was an enslaved person. And she really admired the tenacity of her mother to create a life for her and her sister who passed away in infancy, to be able to live a better life. So she saw within herself, within Black women, the capacity to do for ourselves. If left alone to do it, we know there's an enemy. We understand we're at war here, but we also have to cultivate within ourselves. So she basically says the bath, the broom, and the Bible are going to help us. So she's doing what we now call microeconomics, teaching young Black women and girls how to do domestic science, how to basically use their hands, what's in your hand, to make money for yourself. Simultaneously, she's also going to integrate Black history. She's a Baptist, member of 19th Street Baptist Church. Dr. Woodson was a member of Shiloh Street Baptist Church, Shiloh Baptist. So they're in conversation, they're encountering each other. She looked up to him to be a mentor. And in 1927, at an Asala meeting in Pittsburgh, she was on a panel with Dr. Woodson, Alain Locke, and she herself, and she talked about the social value of Negro history. So she understood the idea that having a mother and knowing your past was important, but also you now need to teach others, both laterally and vertically. And that's what she sought to do. So I just want to close very quickly with a discussion on what Woodson thought about working class Black women. So Woodson was considered to be somewhat of a rather solitary figure and very solemn individual, but he respected the idea of the working class. He respected the idea of Black women working. He was in concert and conversation with both Mrs. Bethune and Mrs. Burroughs. And we all know about Mrs. Bethune, and I don't say we shouldn't have just one. We have an entire constellation of individuals who've done a great work to bring us to this point. And as I close and get ready for our conversation, I want to bring it and elevate, this will lead us to our conversation, that she also had a thing about 12 things the Negro must do for himself. So the idea is she understood the audience that Woodson was talking about, the internal enemy, the external enemy, and the external friend. And so she says there are 12 things we need to start doing for ourselves. And Woodson's keynotes it by saying, the Negro race has never tried to do very much for itself. The race has great possibilities. Properly awakened, the Negro can do the so-called impossible. And she says for her first thing, the Negro must learn to put first things first. The first things are education, development of character traits, a trade, and home ownership. So as you see gentrification, that's been broken out very nicely economically in 1619, we're going to see that this is a continuing theme, because there's always going to be an enemy. And then lastly, the 12, it's online, you can Google it, 12 things the Negro, Negro, must do for himself. And then she says in point 11, the average so-called educated Negro will have to come down out of the air. He is too far inflated over nothing. He sees need and experience similar to the things that Ezekiel had. So those of us who have the education need to probably leave the ivory tower and connect with our journalists. We're actually in the streets getting it done and telling our truth. I look forward to this conversation. Right?
Yes, I thought that was a good summary. And so I wanted to share that with our group. And so if you want to join us, feel free just to let me know, because we're going to keep talking. I'm going to shut down the Facebook Live, and I'll come back towards the end. I have another clip to share with Hannah. I can't remember Jones, the full name, but she discusses some of her book and answers a question. So anyway, I'll be back. Hello, everyone. Happy Sunday. This is the end of our book discussion. This is the 2025 MLRG Life and Style March Tour Stop. And our book discussion is winding up for The Miseducation of the Negro by Carter G. Woodson. We're going to watch one more video clip before we sum this up, okay? Let me switch it around. Oh, that wasn't it. There it is. Okay, here we go.
Yes, to talk about gender in 1619 and the project and the writers you have, how did gender impact your understanding of the history and the telling of that in the 21st century?
Well, one, thank you so much for those opening remarks and for really setting the stage of the conversation. And also, I just want to shout out Kiamsha. That was an amazing presentation. It's always so important when we have these conversations to involve our youth. And so I really appreciated you all being the people who put us in the right frame of mind before we come on the stage. If you read the preface to the book, 1619, I talk about it was as a 15-year-old high school student that I became introduced to the year 1619 in Lerone Bennett's work before the Mayflower. And that's when I first started thinking of myself as maybe I wanted to be a writer. Maybe I wanted to study history. I had never had a Black Studies course until that one semester elective, because of course our history is still optional. So of course it's fitting that we commemorate this day. And I just have to correct for the record, I'm not Dr. Hannah Jones. I have never earned a doctorate. People keep wanting to upgrade my credentials. I appreciate it. But there's, I'm on the stage with two people who actually worked really hard to earn their doctorate, so I can't claim that credit. And never will, because I'm not willing to do that work. So gender, of course, was very critical to everything in the 1619 project when we were deciding which writers, which thinkers, which poets we wanted to include. I literally had a spreadsheet because I wanted to ensure you cannot tell the story of Black people. You can't tell the story of America if you are not also providing that analysis through the minds and the experiences of Black women. If the project overall is arguing that Black people are the perfecters of what democracy we have, it is clearly Black women fighters that this country has ever produced. And so we had to have that credit. And I think most particularly, when we were thinking about expanding the 1619 project from the original, we had to have a chapter on race. And that chapter on race had to be written by a woman, and that it had to talk about the creation of race through the wombs of Black women and what it is like to have to produce the institution of slavery through your bodies, and that we have not thought enough, I think, publicly about the particular type of labor that Black women had to play during the institution of slavery that was outside of the physical labor of the fields, but the forced sexual labor that Black women had to play. So gender was a critical lens through every aspect of the project.
Thank you for that. And as I just want to follow up, and I'm going to get to you, Dr. Matthews, the idea of the transgender violence that Black people are suffering in this country, or people of color, and the idea of gender in terms of human trafficking as well. So that kind of continues. That's kind of a thread out of this 1619 era in which you become commodity. So can we look at the idea of how maybe music and some other things exploit that idea? Because there's a very fine line between just the sexy hip music and then this idea of becoming commodified and being property and or being, monetized in other derogatory ways.
Yes, certainly. I mean, if we look at sexual violence in general, we know that Black women are more likely to experience sexual violence, more likely to experience sexual violence at a younger age, but also the least likely to be believed. That we adultify Black girls, we treat Black girls who experience sexual violence as if they have brought that violence upon themselves. We sexualize our Black girls from a young age, and that is certainly a legacy of slavery. We know during slavery there was no crime of rape against Black women, and that doesn't mean Black women weren't being raped. They were, but it was not illegal. There was literally no crime committed if you sexually assaulted Black women. And I don't have to tell the historians on the stage. You can go back through the historical record and see records of Black girls being assaulted 6 years old, 7 years old, and this not being considered a crime at all. And in fact, even during slavery, the belief that these Black girls wanted sexual relations. Look at how we think about Sally Hemings with Thomas Jefferson, as if this were a relationship, when in fact this was a young girl who had no ability to consent with the man who was raping her. So that to me is then critical in the ideology that we still carry forth about Black women not needing to consent, because we believe Black women are always wanting sex, and that Black women are being sexualized from a very young age. And then when you talk about this internal and external enemy, you cannot grow up and be reared in a white supremacist society and as Black people not adapt some of that white supremacist ideology. We internalize it, and we know that. So we internalize it, of course, then in popular culture, in the way Black women are also sexualized by Black people in Black music, in Black movies, and in other Black forms of art. And so much of the work of 1619 Project, of your archival work, of the work that you do, of course, is pushing back against that narrative and causing us to question it by saying all of these things in our society that we feel are natural or innate, the way that we automatically judge Black girls, this was all constructed. This was all part of a process. This is what Dr. Woodson was working on, right? The miseducation of the Negro was saying that we are actually educated to believe that we're inferior. We are educated to believe that we are belonging to be on the bottom of society, and that you don't actually have to actively oppress people if you oppress their mind, right? What does he say? You don't have to tell them to go to the back door. They'll go on their own. And if there's not a back door, they'll build one, because you have conditioned us to believe that that is our normal status in society. This is why a work like the 1619 Project, why other anti-racist texts are seen as so dangerous, because they offer us an alternative story to explain the country that we live in and the experiences of Black people, and to say everything that you've been taught is not true, right? There's a reason we're the only people in the history of the world, I won't go that far, probably, in the history of the United States, for whom it was illegal to learn to read and write. No other group of people in the United States were ever prohibited by law from being literate. And that's because we understood that education leads to liberation, that you will not accept your circumstances if you know that there is such a thing as freedom, that you have the right to have freedom, and that there are other people fighting for freedom on your behalf.
Thank you for that. Yes, you can applaud for that. That's really dope. That's really dope. And that's a journalist. So I think that's, we need to kind of elevate the journalists who are our front guard historians. So do you...
I'm going to stop right there. But I think that we had a very great conversation. And for those who participated, thank you so much. For those who are interested in joining our upcoming activities, please take a look at our website. Next month will be Spades. That's April. And then, of course, we'll have April, May will be Bingo. And a lot of people have already signed up for some of these activities. People seem to like bingo. It used to be spades. And then in June, so we'll begin reading our next book, and hopefully more of you can be a part of that discussion. And that book is The New Jim Crow by Michelle Alexander. So anyway, I hope that you're having a wonderful weekend, and I'll see you next time. Bye.